Welcome to this 10-year, 10-minute live interview series. Very, very pleased today to host a very special person in the person of Serge de Ganay. Good afternoon, Serge. Welcome.
Hi.
It's great to have you with us for this unique interview about how to manage family businesses in times of crisis. It's an important topic for LPEA, which hosts a very critical group of single family offices present in Luxembourg. And it so happens that Serge is the founding father of this group, which we thank him for again, which we created it in November 18. It's a little bit, how do you say, intimidating to introduce Serge because he has so many hats. You're never sure which one to use. So today we're going to try to use all of them because Serge is the chairman of a family holding company of the Bemberg family, a family which has a 150-year-old business that spans 4 continents across the industry as well as financial services, the financial arm of which is Kilvest Group, that I'm sure many of you know, which is very focused in private equity, among others. But Serge is also an entrepreneur and a private investor. He used to have his own company in the field of strategic consulting, and he's an expert in any matter related to family governance. And in this capacity, I think he has a unique insight into how family-owned groups or family-owned groups that are also partners with private equity companies are managing the current crisis. So Serge, I hope I'm sure I didn't say everything, but we could start with this today. What do you think?
Hello, Rajaa. Plenty enough. Let me first have a thought for people having a tough time, either with their health or their business. But to answer your question, Rajaa, I have the feeling that this crisis is accelerating, amplifying the need to redefine time and space.
Yeah, so you anticipate my questions. What do you mean time, no space?
I will define it as the Einstein effect. Einstein is a physician, famous physician, well known by everyone, that has revisited completely the concept of time and the concept of space and the interrelationship. And it's exactly where we are in today.
Can you illustrate what you mean with time then, please?
Let me take for time a very simple and almost basic example. A couple of years ago, I was with one of the Peugeot family members, you know, the car manufacturer group, and we were giving a speech on family business, and he made a very interesting comment. We recreate the dynamic in the company by tackling properly the management issue. And one of the decisions that they've been taken, one he said, is that we move the executive committee from 1 month to 1 week. So they completely change the timing of the decision-making process.
So much more sense of urgency and being on the ball faster. So you said Einstein effect, time and space. Okay, for time, what about space then?
I would probably refer to what I would call the disruptive couple. And the disruptive couple, for me, is Zoom and Amazon. Now, let's look at it. Amazon has completely changed our relationship with space because for 2,000 years or even more, when you want to access to a product, you go by foot, you go by horse, or you go by car.
Okay.
And today, this is completely changed. The product is coming to you. It's coming to you, and that's changed our relationship with space.
I'm very keen to find out how you manage your own holding company with these new dimensions. Because I think you have quite a few employees in the group, but how about the holding company?
The holding company is an illustration of the situation we've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years. We try to organize the company in a virtual way. That means if you want to write to me tomorrow to send a letter to my holding company, you cannot do it because there is almost no office, no secretary, no chauffeur, no car, no expenses. We are organized virtually. It's an illustration of the relationship with space. But let's take another example. By the way, what we're doing right now with the Zoom, it's a good example of what we're doing. That's why I talk about the Zoom dimension. We had our family business meeting 2 weeks ago. We had 20 people on the screen coming from 4 continents. We had 2 days meeting. Actually, organized with a time zone in the afternoon. And people told me, you know what, Serge, it might have been one of the best meetings we had.
Why was it better? Because normally you value seeing each other and being able to exchange live.
Obviously, I'm not promoting that only we should have virtual meeting, but it proved to be very efficient, time saving and cost saving. Let's take another example, which is now, right now, at the moment we're talking, you and me, in Luxembourg, we have a bank called CBP Quilvest. And that bank usually have 150 employees. If you go to the bank now, if you go to the bank at that time, you will find 5 people. And the bank is working perfectly for the past 2 months with 5 people. Where are the other people? They didn't disappear. What happened is that the Zoom, the Skype, and the technology obviously permit that, allow that. And that will have dramatic consequences on the way we organize ourselves and we work tomorrow.
I think that's definitely food for thought, Serge. What about the financial consequences, the economic consequences of the crisis at the holding level and at other levels?
If I wanted to resume, Rajaa, in one word, I will use the word cash. And even the word triple cash. And people from the private equity are very familiar with that concept of the 3 dimension. What I'm talking about a business unit that you are invested. I'm talking at the platform or the fund. And finally, I'm talking about the holding, where we stand. In our case, we have 3 levels of organization. And if 2 months ago, cash was trash, today, it's not only king, it's essential to the survival. And as family business, I think we have a sensibility there where we consider that we love cash. But you know, usually managers don't like too much cash because cash doesn't bring performance, specifically right now with negative interest rates. But us as a family business, we love cash. And I tell you why, very simple, is that if I look at our history for 150 years, almost 10 to 12 years, we have a major crisis. Whatever happened, major crisis. And when you have cash, you survive, Rajaa. And the problem when you have a family business is first to survive when time is tough. And which is interesting, is that if you have that cash, you might do very interesting investment.
So somehow the crisis also redefines the relationship to cash, and the alignment between the manager and the owner may be difficult to find then.
They're tackling a very political and delicate issue, which is the one, probably the reading of the globally of the management and globally of the shareholder on cash is not the same relationship, because one is really concerned by the performance coming down the road, and it's a responsibility. He has the budget responsibility. That's the responsibility of the CEO as the investor for the coming 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. The family business, one of his concerns is that, am I going to be alive in 10 years from now? Am I going to survive? And by the way, the fact that you have cash can contribute to your performance, because when you have cash, you can catch opportunities in the crisis. And if you have a doubt for that, there is an interesting figure to look at. It's what is the cash of Blackstone today? $115 billion.
You're so right to say that, because when they announced their results, obviously they're not so good after the first impact of COVID, but the share price went up of Blackstone. It's a very good illustration. You mentioned cash and triple cash and cash being more than king. Someone's asking you, if we assume that there's a crisis every 10 years, what is the optimal level of cash that a company or an investment firm should be holding?
You know, if you're pure private equity player, by definition, it's not the same thing if you're an industry. Let's try to answer your question. There was a recent board chart presented by Bemberg, which I thought was quite interesting, showing all the crises during the past 100 years. You saw it, right? And the time to catch back. So if we look at history as an answer, which you can challenge, but over 100 years might make sense. You get out of a crisis, it takes you between 6 months and 3 years. So that gives you some kind of indication. If you have a cash that permits you, that allow you to survive at least 24 months, I think you're in pretty good position.
Serge, any advice to the private equity community, to LPEA, and you're one of our most valued members, before we let you go?
Yes, but I don't consider myself really as a pure expert in private equity, even if I've been an investor for all those past years and the group. I think it's private equity will be there down the road, because in terms of asset allocation, the contribution, asset allocation in terms of investment, private equity in the alternative funds are definitely very, very useful and contributive. Now, the problem is that the problem of private equity maybe today is that it's too much attractive. That's the problem. The problem is it's too good. It's a too good business to be in. But except from that, I do think that PE will be there tomorrow down the road, no doubt.
We have our 10 minutes already, but there are a few questions that the audience want to ask you, and and people want to know from you. So, what are the changes down the road? If you had the crystal ball and you look into the future, I know you've written a couple of papers on changes already in your consulting career.
It's difficult to answer properly to that question because, well, we're just in the middle of the road. But I remember 20 years ago to write an article in a French magazine called Le Figaro. And the title of that article was, "Capitalism doesn't have to demonstrate anymore its efficiency, it has to demonstrate its fairness."
What is your answer?
If we take it as a corporate level, as a company level, I'm not talking at the political level, but I'm talking at the corporate level. I think there is three critical points. The first one is that you have to think and rethink your corporate purpose. You know, what is the end game? Point number one. Point number two, you have to be absolutely concerned by the alignment, internal alignment in your organization, from bottom to top to bottom. Like some people use that eventually the word of empowerment to define it. Mm-hmm. But the alignment is no longer external. It has to be also today, internally has to also to be external, which is new. And because you have to manage also your environment. And to make it in a nutshell, in one word, my feeling, Rajaa, is that if we want to demonstrate capitalism is fair or perceived as fair, sustainability is no longer negotiable.
So I think you're going to be very welcome even more in Luxembourg, where, you know, the green finance agenda is very much at the top of every priority. And so you are a sustainable investor, actually, since 20 years.
Yes, we are in a way, permanently and directly. What I mean by sustainability, I don't use the word in that specific case exclusively as an investor in green fund, for instance, which, by the way, is becoming more and more interesting. And look at the people, you know, under 35 years old, where they want to put their money. But I'm talking more globally. You have to manage your environment in a way that respect a certain numbers of rules of that's called sustainability.
I had to ask you, would you be happy to forego some profit just to make sure that you respect, let's say, ESG criteria? Or do you think profit is driven by being sustainable?
We have that problem in our family with our 200 shareholders, is that we have to permanently to balance profit, performance versus unity, and people happy to join, to be part of the process. And that balance between unity, having people on board, people happy to be around, people feel that the environment is fair, and the performance, that balance, that equilibrium is the challenge. And I think tomorrow, and the sustainable people support that idea, that you don't have to do an arbitrage anymore, and between profit and environment. It shouldn't be an or anymore. It should be an and. That's profit and sustainability.
That's very powerful, Serge. So we should have you back to have a dedicated session to this theme, I think. And we'll have you back maybe to speak longer about governance issues, because this seems to be at the core of everything we are trying to do these days. And stay safe, and great to see you.
Thank you, Rajaa.